Well, welcome to the second week of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales. I'm your moderator. Don't forget, by the way, that our sponsor is the Journal of Educators Online. Um, we have with us today Stephanie Lancaster, who is a senior instructional designer at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. She leads the development of online courses and participates in major projects like the accessibility team and professional learning community. We also have Sarah Umbres, who is also a senior instructional designer with Embry-Riddle, has over 15 years of online teaching and instructional design experience. She started when she was about 8 years old. In addition to research-based instructional design best practices, her professional interests include accessibility, project management within instructional design, and training and mentoring future instructional designers. Today, they're going to talk about ensuring accessibility while striving for innovation. So let me turn it over to Stephanie Boyd. It is early on a Monday for me. Ensuring accessibility while striving for innovation. Take it away, please.
All right. Well, thank you, Bob, for the introduction, and thank you everybody for coming. I know Stephanie mentioned that it's Super Bowl Monday, which is always a little challenging for some people. But we appreciate you coming and hearing our topic for today, which is ensuring accessibility while striving for innovation. And as Bob mentioned, both of us have a really strong professional interest in accessibility. And we also our department is part of our division of academic innovation. So we're always looking for ways to be and remain innovative while also ensuring accessibility. And sometimes that doesn't always go hand in hand. Sometimes it's something that you have to be really mindful of as you're ensuring accessibility remains in those innovative teaching practices. And so that's something that we spent a lot of time talking about, and that we wanted to share with you today some of our thoughts about. This is definitely not a session that you're going to leave with every answer to all of your problems, because it's an ongoing challenge and opportunity for all of us working in online education or education in general, of just ensuring that accessibility, but still striving for that innovation. So that's our topic for today. And we are definitely going to be asking for your thoughts and your insights too as we get later on in the presentation, because it's something that we all can work together on. So, slides. So when we talk about accessibility, there's really kind of the floor and the ceiling. So the floor are those minimum accessibility requirements. So those are the things that are the law, that you have to make sure that you are accomplishing for your students. And they're the things that maybe we think about the most when we think about accessibility. So that ensuring that all of our text and our images and our multimedia are accessible in the courses, whether that's using captions and transcripts, it's using alt text for images, it's ensuring that the text is fully readable for all students. We're avoiding color issues or anything like that. Those are really those minimum accessibility requirements. That's the floor. But when we think about the ceiling, our goal for accessibility is obviously to move beyond just the minimum. So full accessibility, being fully accessible and usable to all learners, is our goal. And we are always moving closer to that, I think. We're not there yet. I don't know if anybody's there yet fully, but that's what we're really kind of trying to talk about today. So if we've met those minimum accessibility requirements, how do we keep moving closer and closer to reaching that goal of being fully accessible and usable for all learners? And that's important because accessibility and accommodation are not the same thing. And sometimes we have those conversations with our faculty course developers. If an accommodation is needed for a student to be successful in a course, then that means that that course wasn't fully usable or accessible for them in the first place. So our goal as instructional designers obviously is not centered around accommodations, it's centered around accessibility. So when we use that term, that's just something that we like to remind everybody of, is that we're really looking to design the course in such a way that eventually maybe the accommodations will not be needed. That's outside of our purview and our role, but the more that we can do in the course and the course design, the better for all of our students. So what to expect in our time together is that we are going to talk about some of the most pressing challenges that we have with accessibility and innovation. We're also going to ask you to share some of yours. So just kind of spoiler alert, think about those things that you're struggling with. Maybe you're here today because you're having a particular issue that you are trying to find a solution to, or a challenge that you're facing with accessibility in your courses. And then we're also going to just discuss some possible solutions for them. You might have an answer for somebody's challenge, or just an idea that you've thought of that worked that you wanted to share with us. There'll be opportunities to discuss those later on in our session too. So as far as our agenda, we'll talk about some of our current challenges. And then again, we'll have an interactive portion where you can share some of your problems and your solutions with us. We'll share some ideas for those common challenges that come up. And then we're going to talk about a big success at our institution, which is our accessibility team. So Stephanie leads our accessibility team. She's going to talk all about what we've done so far, what we're planning to do in the future. And then we have hopefully a really valuable job aid that could be useful for you that we've put together on things to be mindful of with accessibility in a checklist format. And then we will talk about next steps as far as what we're doing at our campus and our university as we move forward, and then any questions that you have. Oh, I forgot we had some flair in our slide. So we are partnered with Quality Matters. We are a Quality Matters institution. We use a lot of their specific review standards in our course reviews. We focus on them in our training for our faculty course developers, as well as our instructional designers too. And so I just wanted to point out, this is, if you're familiar with Quality Matters, they recently updated their Quality Matters rubric to include a new general standard specifically focused on accessibility and usability. So I won't read all of those specific review standards, but we just wanted to highlight that because usability is a huge part of accessibility, and it's something that, again, we don't always think about when we think about what accessibility is. But usability is this functional? Does this make sense for all students, for all learners? Is it readable? Is it easy to use? If it's so hard to use that they're focusing on the course and the design, then they're not focusing on the content of the course, which is the goal. So that also factors into some of our challenges that we're going to talk about in a little bit, because maybe this is considered accessible, but it's not really usable for some students too. And so again, when we think about these words that we're using with accessibility, usability is an important part of it. So what are we being asked to do? This probably sounds similar to what you're being asked to do if you're in any kind of instructional design role or online education role, but we are always being asked to be innovative. As I mentioned, we're in the Division of Academic Innovation, so we're looking to be innovative, not doing the same thing that we've always done in our courses. Students want more for their online courses, and we want to make sure that we're doing that in our courses and our course design. We're also being asked to elevate our discussions, and the online discussion forum is a really well-used tool, frequently used tool, and there's definitely some opportunities to elevate those discussions, take them to the next level, move beyond the have one initial post and 2 replies. So there's lots of different ways that we're trying to do that through different external tools, through incorporating videos and audio replies and multimedia. So there's lots of opportunities there, but also, again, if we think about the accessibility of those options, some challenges there as well. We're also being asked to create authentic assessments, getting away from multiple choice exams, things that are auto-graded but don't necessarily have students demonstrate the application of the content into the real world, is not necessarily the most effective assessment. So we're looking at how we can make our assessments more authentic, how we can measure our students' comprehension of the course learning outcomes in ways that will actually demonstrate their ability to be successful with this content in a future job in the real world. And then we're also looking to humanize the experience. When you're in an online course, it's easy to kind of stay behind your screen and just interact via text with your classmates, with your instructor, and kind of forget that there's a human on the other side of the screen. So the more that we can humanize the online learning experience for our students, for our faculty teaching our online course, we know that that makes a positive impact on our students, on our instructors, and on the overall learning experience. So we're being asked to do all these things. We're really focusing on doing all of these things, but they all have some inherent challenges when you think about accessibility connected to each of these goals. And so it's just something, as I mentioned, that comes up a lot in the work that we do. So some of those challenges that come up, for example, if you have an introduction discussion and you say, create a video, introduce yourself via video to your classmates. There's not always going to be captions and transcripts in student created content or instructor created content. There's machine captions that can be enabled, but to be fully accessible, they have to be 100% accurate. And we know that machine captions are not often 100% accurate, especially if it's more technical, detailed content, or if it's the speaker that has maybe an accent or is not the most clear in the way that they're speaking, that those captions are not going to be correct. And so we want to give the opportunity for students and instructors to create their own multimedia and share with their classmates and their instructor in the course. But we want to ensure that it's usable and accessible for all students accessing that content. Gen AI, you might have heard of this. This is kind of the new thing. It's coming up over and over in education. But as students are using Gen AI, as they're using tools as part of class sanctioned activities, how do we review and ensure that the tools that we're asking students to use are accessible? Sometimes the technology moves so fast that they're not always being mindful of the accessibility components that should be incorporated into them. This is also something that comes up a lot in our math courses or our science courses, are show your work requirements. And this was something that I had never considered really until we spoke with our accessibility department. But we'll have, for example, a math course where students have to answer questions and then show their work, handwritten work, take a picture of it and upload it as part of the assignment. And that's because the instructor wants them to demonstrate that they've done the work themselves, but also to help them see maybe where they went wrong if there's questions that were done incorrectly. But this could be a barrier for students that might have fine motor difficulties or are, for other reasons, unable to write with paper and pen. Those show your work requirements that require paper and pen, and then uploading that image would be a barrier for those students to be able to be successful in meeting those course requirements. So how do we have them show their work when they're not able to do that in the way that the instructor or the course developer is wanting? Group project issues. Again, it's kind of a tale as old as time. In online education, group projects have a lot of benefits, but they also have a lot of challenges. And this is on both that accessibility and the usability side. We are the worldwide campus. So we have students all over the world taking courses. And so if you are in the East Coast of the United States and you are partnered with a student in Asia on a group project, you could be 12 hours apart and you would never maybe even be awake at the same time as your classmate. So there's time zone barriers. There's also, again, if you want to communicate over Zoom or something like that, but one of the students has auditory impairments or visual impairments, how do they communicate in those group projects too? So lots of challenges, but we know again that there's benefits to group projects. We want to have the students have the opportunity to interact in those group settings. And then again, this is also a usability issue more than accessibility issue, but we have worldwide students. How do we ensure that our content is applicable to students where English is not their first language or their international students? If you're familiar with Universal Design for Learning, that's a big component of it too. We want to make sure that our students feel included and reflected in the examples that we're providing, in the images that we're including, in the topics that we're discussing. We are an aeronautical university, so for example, we talk a lot about the FAA in our course assignments, but not every student is in the United States, and they might have a different federal agency in their country that has different laws and policies that have to be followed. So how do we create content that is inclusive for all of our students? So these are some of our big challenges that we talk about. They're obviously not all of them, but there are things that do come up over and over when we are striving for accessibility while also striving for innovation in our courses. And again, it can be challenging, and that's really kind of the theme of our presentation today. It's not impossible. It's not a reason to not be innovative. It's certainly not a reason to not be accessible, but we find more and more that if we're mindful of it from the beginning and we think about that and we design with that in mind, that it is much more effective for everybody involved. So what we want to do now is for me to stop talking for a little bit, and then we want you to share some of your own challenges. So I'm going to put the link in the chat in a minute, but we have a Padlet let me stop sharing really quickly so I can put the link up actually. But the Padlet will have some of our examples that we talked about. And then it will also have opportunities for you to share your own challenges that you might be facing as well. So I'm putting the link in the chat, and then let me share my screen again so I can show you what we have. So here are the 5 challenges that I mentioned. If you find that you can relate to any of those, you're welcome to just use the heart as kind of a vote. It doesn't mean that you love that challenge. It just means you can relate. You have that same issue too. If you have solutions for any of these challenges, please go ahead and choose the add comment option, and then you can comment directly on there. If you have your own challenges that you want to share with us too, you can just click directly on, or you click here, and then you add in your topic as well. And then those will post and add to the board too. So we'll take a little bit of time for you to share your thoughts, your challenges, and hopefully some solutions or recommendations that you have found that help with some of these issues. So we'll take a few minutes to do that.
We should have had some Jeopardy music while we were waiting.
It looks like lots of people can relate so far to Gen AI and group work, those being challenges. So if anybody has found anything that's worked well for either of those, we would love to hear your suggestions too.
Or even some theories on what you think might work, but you haven't tried it yet.
Or what you tried and definitely didn't work, so that we can all save ourselves a little bit of time. Secretive Ferret. I think that was a username given by Padlet, but it's fun. metacognitive reflection is helpful. Yeah, it's for show your work. There's definitely, that's a really great way to have students reflect back on their work, even if they can't do that with paper and pen. Yes, group work issues. It is really challenging in asynchronous online courses. Yes, that they take for flexibility. I will say a couple of the things that we've tried for the group work issue in particular is asking maybe in the first week students' time zone and when they work on their coursework, and then trying to partner students and groups based on that. Obviously, it's not a perfect solution, but hopefully it can help a little bit. And I think especially in online education with group work is students might need more time. So not necessarily 1 week, but maybe 2 weeks per task to give students the chance to do that too. But again, those aren't perfect solutions. It's a challenge. And that doesn't even address maybe interactions that might not be accessible for some students. Yes, collaborative documents and setting them up can help too. So maybe group work, but not necessarily synchronous group work. But again, that takes time. So making sure that you're building that into the workflow of your course. Yes. So about content that's not applicable to ESL or international students, we don't always know cultural colloquialisms that might be interpreted differently. Yeah. Phrases mean different things in different cultures. So that is something to be aware of too. And don't forget, you're also welcome to share your own challenges too. Please don't feel stuck with these 5 that we added. It seems like you all can relate to the challenges that we're facing, but we would love to hear maybe a challenge that you are facing that brought you to the session this morning too. Stephanie, any thoughts or words of wisdom on these challenges that you've found that works?
I mean, I have a few words of wisdom, but they're coming in the second half of this
That's true.
presentation.
Okay.
But I was gonna say, just to speak on the Gen AI of it all, that if you watched the Super Bowl last night, you could tell there were so many commercials even centered on Gen AI. And then on top of that, so many commercials created using Gen AI.
Yes.
So truly,
Like seal
it's
as a seal.
Wait, which part? Which one?
Seal as a seal.
Oh my gosh. That one gave me nightmares actually.
Yes.
But truly it's not going anywhere. So it's something that we have to learn to adapt to because students are using it and they want to use it. And so we have to find a way. But that's also on the technology to catch up to accessibility because it is the responsibility of those organizations to make their product accessible. So I think the more people that use it though, the higher the demand will be for that.
Oh, Shannon says perhaps something that could be added to a review checklist before the course goes live for ESL and or international students. So we have a review checklist that Stephanie will be talking about a little bit later. It doesn't just focus on this, but yeah, I mean, having a checklist to look at is, I think, a really great strategy for thinking about accessibility and usability overall because it helps keep it front of mind. Like I mentioned, it's not something that you necessarily want to wait till the end to think about because you might find that you're creating more work for yourself by having to fix issues or challenges that come up. So it's something that's good to have that you look at the beginning and throughout, hopefully, your course development, and then again at the end before wrapping it up. But it's a really great idea, and it's just something that it's something that Stephanie and I talk a lot about in our roles because it's something that we're very interested in working on professionally, but it's something that for many people, it's not always front of mind for them without something like a checklist. So that's a great tool. So this will remain open, but I'm going to stop sharing and we will go back to our presentation so we can keep moving through hopefully some of our solutions that you might find helpful, or at least what we're trying.
Thank you, Sarah. So earlier, Sarah said that you are not going to leave this presentation with all the answers. However, we would like to provide you with a few possible solutions or answers. And she also discussed a lot of the demands that are put on us as instructional designers at a very large worldwide institution where we serve a lot of students. We have a lot of international students, a lot of first-time students, a lot of our student population is very diverse. So what are we doing to make sure that our courses are both accessible and usable? One of the main initiatives that we have, or I guess I should say, one of the main teams that we have is an accessibility / usability team that was created a while ago. The idea was born from me attending a different conference actually, where another group was talking about how they had created an accessibility team at a much smaller institution. So the team was very small. There were only 4 of them, but they were all from different departments and they were working to make sure that the courses that they worked on were accessible for the faculty that were teaching them. And I was like, this is genius. And we come from an institution that is also department oriented. And all of those departments touch our courses in different ways. And so how can we also kind of implement a similar process? So each of those teams is represented in our accessibility team. We meet regularly to go over different best practices, to go over our initiatives that we have, and to just make sure that we're kind of staying on track, but also keeping up with the technologies that are changing because accessibility is a moving target. We're always trying to reach it, and we most likely never be, like Sarah said, fully accessible. But that's what we're working towards. And so part of that is identifying those challenges and then developing guidance based on those challenges that we've found both in our institution, but also, holistically outside. So to do that, we created our team. You can see here that we're made up of a lot of different departments. So we have our Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. So 2 of our members from the accessibility team come from there. Instructional Design and Development, that's where both Sarah and I work in that department. So we're the members of the accessibility team. We also have multimedia represented, learning support and design, instructional technology, and user experience. All of us come from a different position within the organization, so we all look at it a little bit differently, which has really helped to create a cohesive team that can bring in experience because maybe I'll be like, oh, this is a fantastic idea. And then somebody else is like, yeah, but you also have to think about the implementation and the legality of it and the IT behind it. Because I'm like, oh, this is a great tool. And they're like, yeah, but there's so many other pieces of it that we have to make sure fit. And so each of us has our own perspective, and it really does help to create one cohesive team with a cohesive message. So with those messages in mind, when we first started, we had a set of goals and objectives that we wanted to achieve. You can read through the list here. I'm not going to read them all to you. However, just to highlight a few, we did want to create an organized approach. As I just said, we all come from different departments, but when we get together, it is with accessibility and usability in mind and not just our jobs. So we're coming together to look at resources and to make sure that we're organized in our thoughts and our processes. Also, none of us are decision makers per se. We're not high enough up there to change how we do things within the organization, but we do like to assist and advise leadership in, hey, these are some things we should consider. We would like to implement this. And just to provide guidance on what we have found in both our research and other institutions. I'm going to apologize for a moment. And then finally, because we are working on courses in various ways, we can identify issues pretty much immediately in terms of accessibility. And so just trying to identify those up front and get out ahead of it rather than being reactive and having to find solutions, we can do research and be a little more proactive in our accessibility and usability in our courses. So to do that, we essentially came up with various initiatives that we would like to achieve over the next few years. So it started with our short-term initiatives. The first one was to create we say one-ish, a one-page list of accessibility standards to check our courses and our tools and our multimedia that we put in our courses to make sure they're fully accessible. So we created that one-page guide that we give out to all new instructional designers, new media members, new instructional technologists, so that they can use it throughout their process of creating things and content for our courses. Next, we have a team who one of their jobs essentially is, or one of their duties is to look at all of the new tools that go in our courses, and they have a checklist for that as well. So we provided some guidance, or I guess kind of some feedback on their current checklist, and it was like, hey, could you implement these things to make sure that accessibility is a priority? And now it is a priority that essentially when they're recommending a tool, they say this is fully accessible or it's not fully accessible. So we don't fully recommend it, but here's what the workarounds that we can achieve in our courses. We're also going to survey our students on the accessibility in our courses to see what their perception is, because we're designing with that in mind, or we're creating with that in mind, but it doesn't mean it's actually happening. So we would like to survey our students and get feedback on what our course design actually does for them, students with accommodations. Next, we are going to do a professional development series, and we're going to touch on that in a little bit more, but it's one of our big initiatives that we're working on right now. We have over 800 adjunct and full-time faculty at our institution, so making sure that accessibility is at the forefront of their mind, but also so that they understand how it affects students and ways to make it a little bit better in the courses. We're going to actually perform some user testing where students go in and provide us feedback on the design process. And then we're also going to look at implementing a full-time position who does look at accessibility and usability within our courses. And then, as Sarah touched on earlier, one of the big issues is student-created content that is not accessible for other students. So how can we make sure that videos in our courses have captions, which should be an automatic, and then transcripts would be even better. I just want to say though, not even just students, also instructors, making sure that anything instructors add to our courses is fully accessible. But in this case, really making sure that student created content as well, also images. And then finally, implementing an accessibility review for any other student facing content. So not just necessarily our courses, but any content that they may be looking at, including our website and promotional materials, advising materials, student readiness content. So just making sure that's also fully accessible and usable. So these are our current initiatives that we're working on.
And just to clarify really quickly that the icons on there, so we've completed the two with the check marks, the essential accessibility standards, and then the checklist, and then all the other ones except for one are projects that we are in progress on, that we're working towards, but we haven't achieved yet.
And the checklist I'll be sharing with you all, so don't worry, you do get our nifty one-ish page checklist. So with that in mind, we did create an accessibility checklist. We already have a quality review that our courses go through. We have a design review that they go through. However, we did create this accessibility checklist for instructional designers, faculty members, multimedia to use in the process of creating content, but also to just make sure that they're aware of different accessibility issues in our courses. So we did kind of go with Quality Matters standards. We use that as one of the backbones of the checklist. We also researched using our production guide. We have a style guide that we use that talks, about uses of bullets and uses of links. We have our web accessibility and policy. So we use that, information technology, web accessibility, and audio video guide. And we also kind of just looked on the internet and said, what are other universities doing? What are their best practices? What can we use in our checklist that maybe we haven't really thought about? And then obviously Canvas has their own accessibility guidelines. So we also looked at those because we are a Canvas LMS institution. So what are they doing for accessibility that we can implement as well? So I'm going to go ahead and share that checklist in the chat now. If the link does not work, now would be a great time. So please let me know before the session ends so that we can provide a working link if that one's not working. But that's our checklist. So feel free to adapt it for your university or institution and let us know how it works. And then the next initiative that we're working on is our faculty development. This is something that's very important to us because our courses we're a templated university. So we have developers who create the course and then it's handed off to adjunct faculty for the most part, but it's some full-timers who teach these courses. And they may not be aware that things that they add to the course should also be accessible. So that includes announcements or new videos or links or perfect, Shannon. Thank you for letting me know. So any content that's added to the course should also be accessible. And so what we did is we created a little knowledge check. Our faculty take a yearly certification course just to make sure that they are up to date and able to teach our courses. So we implemented a self-check on there in accessibility. And then we're going to use that to figure out different knowledge gaps so that we can create a professional development series that really gets to what our instructors are missing in terms of accessibility and usability. And so we'll be offering 3 different courses throughout 2025, and then it'll be quarterly thereafter. And so our goal is to essentially create some live offerings, synchronous offerings, and then there will be an in Canvas piece as well. So just to make sure that they're really taking in the information that we're providing and able to implement it in their courses. And then they will be credentialed. They'll be known as Eagle Accessibility Advocates because we do come from Embry-Riddle, which our mascot is the eagle. We weren't Super Bowl oriented yet, don't worry. But now that they are the champions, it really does work, Sarah. I just realized that. So Eagle Accessibility Advocates is what they'll be known as once they have completed the professional development series. And this is just a great way for them to understand accessibility, but also for us to create awareness beforehand so that we don't have to go back and be like, hey, can you add captions to this? Or hey, can you add alt text to this? Now they'll be doing it up front. And it really will be beneficial both to the students and to the faculty and staff themselves. So that's our current initiatives. What questions do you have? Or have you thought of more solutions in the process of this presentation?
Stephanie, well, maybe they're thinking about their questions. Do you want to share really quickly the checklist? Share it?
I did.
Oh, I mean, like just screen share and just talk about.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Give me one. I'm sorry. I was like, wait, I did. Let me open the link for myself. How much more time do we have, Sarah? Just so I know. Do you happen to know?
I think we go until 10:50 if needed.
Okay. So can you all see the checklist?
We're seeing a blank desktop.
Okay, I'll change it. It's not sharing the correct window. Now you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll zoom in so hopefully you can see. This is our accessibility checklist. We broke it down by content instead of, just a random checklist. So text is obviously the predominant way in which we provide content to our students. So it's something that's at the top of our list. So different ways of making sure that our text is accessible, both to students who are using assistive technology or students who may not be using it. And so obviously proper heading structure, or in hierarchy, contrast, making sure that text is discoverable, and that we're using the correct links. Text color is not the only way information is conveyed. So these are the different ways that we're making sure that faculty and staff are ensuring text is accessible. Also, images are a huge part of our courses. We use decorative images, but we also use images for content. So making sure that those are accessible. One of the big ways is also making sure that alt text or alternative text conveys the context of an image. So that's something that's really important to us because while an image may be in a course, what is the purpose of it? And how can we make sure that a student who is using assistive technology understands the context of this image on that page or in that course rather than just seeing, in this case, a plane. So what is the context for it? Is it for a sustainability class, a visual design class, an aviation class, and just making sure that it really gets to the point for students rather than just some superfluous image. Also, obviously, hyperlinks, we link out to a lot of different things. So just making sure those are consistent and are accessible. Course navigation, so this really touches on usability a lot. So just making sure that students are, we have a consistent layout design so students aren't confused. Are the instructions clear? Is everything purposeful in the course? Is there just random things that pop up and confuse students? So really looking at that for accessibility. Lists and equations. We have a huge media team that works with us, so making sure that all of the content that the media teams creates is accessible. And then obviously tables and charts. We are an aeronautical university, so we have a huge engineering and math program. And so they use a lot of tables, they use a lot of charts. And so just making sure all of those are accessible, which it's surprisingly difficult, maybe not surprisingly difficult. Actually, maybe you understand how difficult it is. And so just making sure that all of those are complete. And then obviously design elements and then third-party tools, as I touched on before. We do have a separate team that works on those, but also just keeping it at the forefront of everybody's mind that every tool we put in a course should be fully accessible. So even just thinking about like a podcast, for example, if you put it in a course, is there a transcript for that podcast? Because if not, it's not accessible to all of our students. So that is the checklist that we created. Sarah, any comments about it?
Shannon mentioned in the chat that the examples of how the alt text might vary based on the purpose of the image. And I just wanted to say too that that was one of the recommendations that our committee made is we actually used to have alt text for every single image throughout our courses. And then actually, as we did research on the best practices, we started using the decorative image checkbox a lot more and recommending that to our designers too. And if you think about alt text, if a student's using a screen reader, for example, they're reading the text and then they're almost being interrupted in the text that they're hearing to hear the description of the image. And so if the image doesn't add value to the text that is being read, it's actually more distracting to them to have the alt text in there if it's not improving their learning or their understanding of the content. So that's just one example of, it's a small recommendation, but it's an impactful one that we've started doing in our courses is making sure that do we need alt text for this image or do we just check that box? And then if we do have alt text, making sure that it's saying the information, conveying the information that it should. So I think that that was a big thing that our committee sent. It sounds small, but it is big. Well, I think that that wraps up our presentation. I know we have a couple more minutes if anybody has any questions. We hope that you find the checklist useful or, you know, take it and modify it as needed for your institution, but just having something there that everybody kind of is on the same page for has been really beneficial for us. Bob, I think we're handing it back to you now.
Well, I appreciate it. I always try to include some things about accessibility in the conference. I happen to be hearing impaired, or was. up until a few years ago, I got cochlear implants, but always been sensitive to it, and it's always bothers me when faculty would say, "Oh, but that's really hard to do, to accommodate whatever." Hey, that's too bad. It's what you have to do. It's the right thing to do, and we'll deal with it.
It's one of those things that a lot of people don't think about until it impacts them. And so that's why we really tried to create awareness up front, especially with the professional development initiative that we're trying to achieve by just letting, like, the first question it asked them is how many people worldwide are impacted by a disability. And I think it's a shocking number for most people, and they don't realize how prevalent it is, especially with our population where 70% of our students are either veteran or active service, active military. And so it's even higher rates. And so I just think that creating that awareness is even better in terms of not just being like, these are the things you should do, but this is why you're doing them.
And a lot of that benefits people who have no kind of you know disability or whatever. Uh, Even though I hear great right now, I still look at the captioning just in case I miss something that helps me see what I missed,
Yep.
and that's a great benefit. Anyway, uh, it's I don't know. I always hope by now wouldn't be an issue, but there are still those folks who say, "Well, now I'll deal with it when somebody says they have a problem with it."
Yeah.
And well, that's the wrong time to be doing it.
Accommodation, not accessibility.
Yep. So, well, thank you both. I'm always pleased to have people from Embry-Riddle as either presenters or attendees. It's always great to have you guys here, and I always learn something. So thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Well,
Well,
thank
thank
you
you.
so much. Yeah. And everybody who stuck around, we appreciate you coming to our session too. Thank you.